Just we just may lose you when you go into a tunnel.
What's that?
We may lose you when you go into a tunnel.
Yeah, right. Okay. I hope it'll be okay this way. Okay, so I'll just say something as we normally do from the Parsha. We read Parshas Vayelech, the shortest Parsha in the Torah, only 30 psukim. Easy for Balei Kriya to prepare for this one. So actually, the first word of Parsha Vayelech was uncertainty. Right? And he starts speaking. But usually, it doesn't say that he goes somewhere in order to speak to Bnei Israel. It just says by the Bnei Israel, and he speaks. So the commentaries on the Parsha explain in different ways. There is explanation of the Ibn Ezra and the Rashbam. Similarly, both say that he went to every single tribe, or even some say that he visited in every single tent, each family, in order to farewell, to say goodbye, because he was at the time about to die. Sorry, some books fell here. 1 second. Okay. It was the end of his life, so he was saying goodbye to everyone. So the speech of his this whole speech that he's 120 years old. The people, Hashem isn't allowing him. This whole speech he repeated over and over again for each tribe, or some even say for each family. So that's the way to look at it. There's a Kliyakar. Kliyakar even says something more interesting, that he was at 120 years old, so quite old, and people may have thought that he's no longer capable of leading physically. So says the Kliyakar, we know that that he didn't become an old, fragile person that can barely walk and barely see. He was totally up to his strength. So he proved to Am Yisrael, Vayelech Moshe, he walked all along without a cane, through the camp, back and forth, to prove to them that he's with all his strength, with all his might, and he's still able to. Oh, here we come into a tunnel. We'll see if we can. Hopefully, it's not going to break up the internet. Oh, it's a short one, so it should be okay. So he proved to them by walking, just by walking, that he's totally with all his strength, and it's only because Hashem isn't allowing him to continue leading into Eretz Yisrael. That's why he has to die. But maybe somebody can explain it in a way that teaches us something beyond physical issues and beyond faring well and saying goodbye. It teaches us, this word Vayelech is actually a direction in life, that we should always be striving to progress, to climb up, to go further and further in our lives. So even Moshe Rabbeinu, the last day of his life, after having been so accomplished, the most accomplished human being that ever was created, and so successful and close to Hashem, the closest ever person can ever get to Hashem. Even so, at the last day of his life, he's still Vayelech. He's still progressing. He's still trying to be a drop better than what he was before. Still climbing a little bit further up. That's the idea of Vayelech. And we see in the Parsha itself how he writes 13 Sifrei Torah in that one last day of his life. 13 Sifrei Torah. Of course, it was miraculous. It was only with the help of Hashem. So he's continuing the last day of his life to continue to progress, to do better and better, to do the best he can to strengthen his spirituality even further. And this he takes after Avram Avinu. We just read the Akedah on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And by Avram Avinu, we find the exact same style, personality. It says in the beginning, very beginning of Avram's life, he was 75 years old at the time, but the first time we meet Avram, Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha, ve'atzecha, u'martecha ve'tavicha ad she'areka. Lech lecha. Be a person who's always progressing, who's always walking forward, who's always going forward. And even at the end of towards the end of his life, it wasn't the very end, he was 137 at the time, when he was commanded to take Yitzchak to the Temple Mount, which will later be Temple Mount, Har HaMoriah, and slaughter him. It says there too. Again, lech lecha. Always progress, always do better. Always perfect your ways. So that's what this Parsha's message is. Our to say that we should always be striving to do better. Always strive to do more mitzvot, more good deeds, fulfill more halachot, learn more. The more we progress spiritually, closer we get to Hashem, and never stop the climbing the ladder. Okay, so that's here. So we'll continue the topic. I think I forgot to send last week's year by recording last week's year. I will, B'ezrat Hashem, as soon as possible, do both this week's and last week's. So you can review if you'd like. Whoever wasn't there can look at, can hear it. Okay, so we dealt last week, unless, by the way, if anyone has some Kippur questions, I'll be glad to take them also. If you'd like to ask questions about Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Actually, this will be the last class before Yom Kippur and Sukkot. We'll go for a short vacation of 2.5 weeks or so of Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and after Sukkot we'll continue. I think Sukkot ends, just checking in the calendar, Shmini Atzeret falls on Tuesday. So the following Sunday should be fine. The following Sunday, right after Sukkot, Kaf Zayin Tishrei, October 3rd. That will be the next time we'll be learning after today. Okay, so with regards to Shmitta, we did, as best summary in short form, we did the halachos regarding working of the land, and in our private homes, in pots, plants in pots, and outdoor plants, indoor plants. We've done all of that. So we can continue now. We'll do the halachos regarding the holy fruit and vegetables that grow from the land during Shmitta. How do we deal with the holiness of the fruits and vegetables, and which fruits are holy, which aren't? all of that. So firstly, as for the moment now, only vegetables can be holy of the Shmitta year, because by vegetables, the deciding fact, the moment that is the deciding factor whether it's holy or yet still from the 6th year and unholy, is the moment you pick the fruit, the vegetables from the ground. Lekita. It goes by lekita. The moment you pick the fresh vegetables from the ground during the Shmitta year, then it has the holiness of the year. Even if it grew almost entirely, most of the growth of the vegetable was on the 6th year, Tafshin Pei Aleph, but if it was picked from the ground, Tafshin Pei Bet, any day as of Rosh Hashanah onwards, then it receives the holiness of the Shmitta. So already today, there may be out there in the shops Shmitta produce of vegetables, cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, lettuce, all the vegetables that get picked from the ground as of Rosh Hashanah onwards are holy, have the Shvit in them, have the holiness of Shvit in them. Fruits, on contrary, fruits do not go by the time when they sprout, just the very beginning appearance of the fruit after the bud falls off the tree. You get the flower. Sorry, after the flower falls off the tree, so you start getting the very beginning of the fruit starts growing. That's the chanata. So if that stage occurs after Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Pei Bet, then that fruit, eventually when it will grow enough and be ripe and be picked from the ground, that fruit is holy, this is sweet. Whereas any fruit that began sprouting during the 6th year, even if the majority of the growth and the picking of it was during the Shmitta year, it's not Shmitta, it's not holy, doesn't bear the holiness of the Shmitta year. You treat it as a regular non-holy fruit, those like any other fruit that grew during the previous 6 years, non-holy. Okay, so that's how we define. By wheat, any of the 5 types of grains that grow, the wheat, barley, spelt, oat, all the 5 grains, we go by Shlish Gidul. Shlish Gidul is the third way of its growth. If it grew third way during the 6th year, so it's not considered holy, but if it grew just a little bit during the 6th year, but didn't get to the third of its growth, rather it still grew partially the third part of the first third of the growth happened during Shmitta, and the rest of it, then it's holy. It bears the holiness of Shmitta in it. Okay. Now, before we go to how to deal with fruit and vegetables that are holy according to these definitions, how to deal with them, we have to explain various different types of ways that that the fruits and vegetables are received and grown on the Shmitta year. Depends the ownership, and it depends where they grew. So first of all, the easiest situation, it has no complications in it whatsoever, but on the other hand, it lacks the holiness of Shmitta, is any produce that comes from Chutz La'aretz. It's called Yevul Chul. Produce that grows in Chutz La'aretz, anywhere that's outside the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Those fruits and vegetables have no holiness whatsoever, even though they were shipped and imported into Israel. They don't bear the holiness of the Shmitta. You treat them like a regular fruit and vegetable, like anything you would during the 6 past years. nothing to do with the holiness of Shmitta. You just eat them normally, throw them in the garbage normally. You can sell them normally. You can squeeze their juice out of them normally. Whatever you want to do, you can do. No holiness whatsoever. That's Yevul Chul. On the other hand, it's lacking the holiness of Shmitta, so you don't get the special, unique mitzvah, or some, according to, there is a Ramban that possibly holds that there's a mitzvah to eat the holy fruit of Shmitta. And even if there isn't, according to most poskim, there is no such mitzvah to eat it, but it's much, much holier. It bears holiness in it, much, much holier than fruits and vegetables that come from Chutzart. Any fruit that grows in Israel already inherently is holier than fruits or vegetables that grow in Chutzart. That we know from the famous Bach in Siman Reish Chet 208 in Orach Chaim, who expresses this idea that fruit and vegetables that grow from the ground in Eretz Israel are holy, bear the holiness of the ground. And during the Shmitta year, even more so, during the Shmitta year, we have the special holiness of the Shmitta year that's absorbed in the fruits and vegetables that we eat on the Shmitta year. So those fruits and vegetables, the produce that comes from Chutzart, no issue whatsoever. Then we have what grows in Eretz Yisrael, within the borders of Eretz Yisrael, but it's grown by and owned by Goyim. It's owned by Arabs normally. Produce that grows in Yehuda v'Shomron or in the Gaza Strip. If there's any way to get produce from them, I assume not. But at least in Yehuda v'Shomron and in parts of the Galil, there are definitely land. There is definitely land that's owned by non-Jews, mainly Arabs. So the question is, do they bear rules of the Shmitta or not? Obviously, if the land is owned by a goy and the goy is the one who works the land, then there's no prohibition of the actual work he does. He's allowed to do any work he would like because of the issue.
Rabbi, I think we lost you.
Okay, sorry about that. You got disconnected. Okay, back. We were saying that any land that's owned by a Jew, we're not allowed to use a non-Jew to do the work for us, to work the land for us, the planting, the fertilizing, the pruning, harvesting, anything that we're not supposed to do on Shmitta year, we cannot use a goy to do it for us if it's land owned by a Jew. How come? Because there's a whole big discussion whether the prohibitions of Shmitta are on the person, on the human being, or on the land. Meaning is that the human being, the Jew, is not allowed to work the land, and therefore, if it was a goy, you wouldn't be allowed to use a goy to do it for you. Or is the prohibition that the land cannot be worked upon? If it's owned by a Jew, it's not allowed to work on Shmitta year, no matter who makes it work. So even though it's a non-Jew who works the land, it won't do anything. It won't help. We still mustn't use him, because I have to let Shlomo Zalman decide, at least misafek, from doubt of better of proof this way or that, he says that we mustn't allow a goy to do any work in Jewish-owned land. But if the goy owns the land and works it by himself without a Jew helping him, then there's no prohibition of any sort, because the goy is not required. It's not one to share with somebody in Noach. He's not required to refrain from work on Shmitta. And the land is owned by a goy, so the land doesn't have to rest either, because it's not Jewish-owned land. So from that point of view, it's okay. The issue is with regards to the holiness. Does the fruit that grows within that land that was grown by a non-Jew and owned by a non-Jew, does the fruit bear the holiness of Shmitta? Because after all, true that it's owned by a goy, but it's part of the land of Israel. Judah and Samaria is definitely part of Israel. Galil is definitely part of Israel. Negev is part of Israel. Certain parts of the Negev, all the way down, but the more northern parts of the Negev are part of Israel. So, in all these areas where goyim own the land and grow the fruits and vegetables, do they have the holiness of Shmitta or not? That's a big dispute between the Bet Yosef and the Mabit. They were both living at the same time. Rabbi Yosef Mitrani is the Mabit, and the Bet Yosef is, of course, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch. They had a big argument on this point exactly. It's called the Im Yesh Kinyan Legoy Lafkia Mikdushat Eretz Yisrael. Does the goy have an ability, by purchasing the land in Israel, does the goy have an ability to cancel the holiness of the land? It's owned by, is the fact that it's owned by a goy, does that cancel the holiness of the land? And it doesn't bear the holiness that makes the fruit holy with Kedushat Shvi. So the Bet Yosef held, Yesh kinyan legoy lafkia, meaning a goy cancels, by owning the parts of the land, the goy cancels the holiness of the land. Whereas the said, the goy does not have the ability, and still the fruits and vegetables bear the holiness as long as it's within the borders. It's holy, the holiness of Shvit. How do we? By the way, there are poskim who hold that the Bet Yosef himself, towards the end of his life, retracted and agreed to the Mabit's opinion that the goy doesn't have the ability to cancel the holiness of the land. But the Chida is one of the greatest Sephardic poskim within the last 300 years or so. He proves that it's not true, that the Bet Yosef remained with his opinion till the end of his life. How does he prove that? Because in the shoot of Kat Rochel, there's a response written by Rabbi Yosef Karo called Avkat Rochel. There he has a tshuva answering someone's question and telling him that when a goy owns the land and grows fruits and vegetables in the field, the fruits and vegetables do not retain holiness of Shmitta because it's owned by a goy, which was his opinion all the years. And that tshuva was written, it says it on the tshuva itself, Shin Lamed Dalet, which was around 450 years ago, which is the very end of his life. He passed away Shin Lamed Hey, 1 year later. So how can that be that a year before he passes away, he's still holding the way he did all his life, and suddenly the last year he switched his mind, his opinion? Doesn't make sense. So that's a very solid proof that he remained with his opinion all through his lifetime, never retracted, never went back on his opinion and word, and he remained with the fact that the goy cancels the holiness from the fruits and vegetables. So according to that, anything we buy from a goy owned by a goy, land that's owned by a goy, they grew in his land, we do not have to keep Kedushat Shvit in it. Okay. The Mabit holds that there is Kedushat Shvit. You can't take it away you can't cancel it from the land, and therefore you do have to hold all the halachos of Shvit. The halacha lemaise, what do we do? La halacha, if we get fruit that was grown by an Arab in a land owned by him, a field owned by an Arab, there's a difference in opinion even within the modern day poskim how to go by this. The Chazon Ish held en kinyan legoy lafkam, meaning he held like the Mabit. The Chazon Ish said that the goy doesn't have the power, the strength to cancel the holiness of the ground, and therefore he holds that we must keep the holiness in the fruits and vegetables, even though they were grown by a non-Jew. And that's the way to do it. Bnei Brak, they go by the Chazon Ish, and they hold that there is holiness in the fruits and vegetables grown by a non-Jew. In Yerushalayim, the custom of Yerushalayim, Minhag Yerushalayim is to hold like the Bis Yosef, that there is no Kedushat Shvit, there is no holiness in the fruits grown by a non-Jew. And this is the opinion of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who lived in Yerushalayim. He held that that's the custom in Yerushalayim, and we can definitely follow the Bis Yosef opinion, more lenient, not to bear Shvit in those fruits and vegetables. By the way, there's also a chumrah of the Bis Yosef and a kula of the Mabit. It turns around with regards to Trumos Sumasros. How does that work? During the Shmita year, it's also important to know if you have fruits and vegetables in your own backyard, in your own garden. So during the Shmita year, there is no Trumos Sumasros. You do not take out from your fruits and vegetables that grow in your backyard. You do not need to remove Shmut Masros the whole year. How come? Because you're meant to allow anyone and everyone to come in and take from your fruit. It's supposed to be hefker. It's supposed to be no man's land, owned by no one. You're supposed to allow anyone to come in. And therefore, it's not true that you have to care for the Kohanim and Levim and needy people like the Trumos Masros do. They're there to care for those who don't have, to supply for those who don't have. So you give a tenth to a Levi, you give 100th, he gives a tenth of his to a coin, and you give another piece to the coin as truma. You give a tenth to the needy people. All that is not necessary on Shmita, because during the Shmita year, everyone can take from the fruits and vegetables. So same as you can pick from the tree, so can the Kohen, so can the Levi, so can the needy. So why would you have to give them part of what you picked from the tree? So therefore, there's no Trumos Masos during the entire Shemitah year. By the way, there is Neter Avai. Neter Avai is the fourth year of a tree, the fourth year that it bears fruit. Then we keep the entire year. Is called Neter Avai. It's the fruit bear the holiness of Neter Avai the entire year. We're talking about every year, not during the Shemitah year necessarily. And we must eat the fruit in Yerushalayim, or if we can't get there, and nowadays we can't anyhow because we're not pure. To be pure to eat the fruit, so we redeem the holiness of the fruit onto a coin. And in the end, we get rid of the coin after redeeming several times the fruit that's Neter Avai. And we have to then redeem the holiness of the coin onto a cup, a tablespoon of sugar, and dissolve it in the sink. So, so I was saying that during the Shemitah year, there's no Trumos Masos, but there is Neter Avai. If there's a fourth year, someone has a tree that's in its fourth year, even though it's Shemitah, you must keep those fruits holy from the point of view of Neter Avai, and only have to redeem them on a coin. Only then can you eat from them. And by the way, this means that since we said before that during the Shmitta year, it's hefker, everyone can pick from your fruits. So you also have to mark a tree that's in its 4th year. You have to have a sign, netarevai. Because how else would people know that when they come and pick from the tree, which is allowed, where they're allowed because it's hefker, how should they know that it's a netarevai tree? So you have to have a sign up, netarevai. So everyone should know that when they pick from that tree, they need to redeem the holiness onto a coin, and only then eat the fruit that they picked from the hefker tree. Okay, so going back to Bet Yosef in the Mabit, we said that according to Bet Yosef, there is no shvid, there's no holiness in the fruits and vegetables that grow from a goy, the land of a goy, because he has the ability to cancel the holiness from the ground. So it says to Bet Yosef, according to that, you would have to take out Trumos Masros from any fruits and vegetables you buy from that goy. Because the moment there is no Shmitta issue, there's no Shmitta holiness in them, so they're back to being owned by someone. They're no longer hefker. So when you buy them from the goy, you should be taking out Trumos Masros. But that's only true if the stage of meruach was done by a Jew. Because what is meruach? Meruach means when all the fruits are, you set them in a pile and they're all ready to be taken out of the field. They're all in a nice pile, set up to be taken from the field. That stage is what is the deciding point whether those fruits would need to take Trumos Masros from. Meaning if a goy does the meruach, if a goy is the one that sets up the pile and makes it all ready to be shipped out of the field, and the fruits are not necessary to take out Trumos Masros from. Whereas if a Jew does the meruach, if a Jew sets them up in the pile nicely, then you are supposed to take Trumos Masros, even though they grew in the land of a non-Jew, and we're holding like the Bet Yosef at this point, that he has the ability to cancel the holiness of the fruit. But since the meruach was done by a Jew, so that gives back the holiness to the fruits who have to take Trumos Masros out of them. And since it's not holy by the Shmitta, from the Shmitta point of view, because we said that we're going according to Bet Yosef's opinion, that the goy has the power to cancel the holiness of the ground with regards to Shmitta. So if it's not Shmitta and the meruach was done by a Jew, then you need to take out Trumos Masros from that pile and give it to the Kohen, the Levi, the needy, as opposed to. By the way, the Shmitta year, with regards to Meiser Ani versus Meiser Sheni, we take out Meiser Ani, not Meiser Sheni. There is a sequence of years that we do either or. The 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years are Meiser Sheni, and 3rd and 6th are Meiser Ani. So it's also the Shvid, the 7th year, is also Meiser Ani for any fruits and vegetables that do require to take out of them Trumos Masros. Okay, now, all that is according to Bet Yosef. According to the Mabit, any produce that was grown in the land of Israel, even though it's owned by a non-Jew, and even though a non-Jew is the one who worked the land, the fruits are holy because of Shvid. The Mabit, we said, says that the goy doesn't have the power to cancel the holiness of the ground. So they are holy because of Shvid. On the other hand, he has a kula here. They don't need Trumos Masros. You must eat them, bearing in mind the holiness of the Shvi. That's for sure. Like we'll be learning eventually, how do we eat them properly, or how do we dispose of them properly, and all that. Or what are the uses? Can we use fruits and vegetables of Shvi? We'll be going to that soon. The Mabit says that it bears the holiness, and therefore it's really hefker, even though it's owned by a goy, so a goy won't let anyone come in and take from his fruits. But it's Kedusha Shvid, and Kedusha Shvid does not deserve Trumos Masros. You don't need to take out Trumos Masros. It's actually interesting. It's Kedusha Shvid on one end, and you buy it from a goy. Bear the holiness of Shvid in the produce, but the Kohen, Levi, and needy could not have gone in and taken whatever they want because the guy is a mafkir. The guy doesn't make his land hefker for all to take from. So even though they did not have an opportunity to benefit from those fruits and vegetables, you still don't need to give them to Amos Masters because it's Tishat Shmit. The moment something is Tishat Shmit, so it's considered the idea behind it doesn't work in this case. To Yevul Nochi, it's called Yevul Nochi, fruits and vegetables that grow by a goy in our land, owned by a goy and grown by a goy. So he said finally that in Bnei Brak and other places where they follow the Chazanish, you would need to hold the fruits and vegetables as holy, even though they're owned and grown by a non-Jew. Whereas in Yerushalayim and other places who follow Shlomo Zalman and other poskim, they hold that there is no Tishat Shmit like the B'S Yosef, and you don't need to hold from Tishat Shmit in the fruits and vegetables that are grown by a goy. Another way to grow fruits and vegetables in this field is by using Hetera Mechira. Hetera Mechira means that the chief rabbinate of Israel, and that they've done last week before Rosh Hashanah, the chief rabbis of Israel have all the farmers who grow fruits and vegetables in Israel, whoever would like to be part of this agreement, they have them sign a contract that they're selling their land to a non-Jew. So many areas of Israel are sold to non-Jews before the Shmita year, so that owned by a non-Jew makes it now permissible to work the land. Although there are different opinions whether we could do all the work that is required for growing the produce, or only the rabbinic prohibitions are allowed be'eter mechira and not the Doraita ones. As you recall, we spoke about the Doraita being planting, pruning, and harvesting, and plowing. Those 5 are the Doraita level prohibitions. Most poskim hold it by eter mechira when we sell it to a guy. Still, a Jew cannot do those 5 melachos actions on Shmita. But the rest of the stuff, it's all rabbinic, can be done normally. You don't need to worry about Shmita because you sold it to a non-Jew. This actually only works, of course. This obviously only works according to the B'S Yosef, that a guy has the power to take away the holiness of the ground. And even so, we're restricted by the Doraita level prohibitions not to do them in that land because we're not 100% sure that this sale works. It's not really owned by a non-Jew. It's something a little bit to sneak away from the Shmita. So the Doraita level we keep. But the rabbinic level, we can do whatever we'd like. Whatever holds of Hetzer Mechira. Some say that it's all make-believe. It's not real. And therefore, we don't hold up the Hetzer Mechira. And we can't eat anything that comes from Hetzer Mechira because it was worked on non-permissibly. But those who hold Hetzer Mechira, that it works and the guy really owned the land and he was allowed to work it and the Jew is allowed to work it, besides those 4 or 5 Doraita level prohibitions, then we can eat the produce. Whoever holds Hetzer Mechira can eat the produce. And if you go by the Chazanish, goes by the Mabit, then we need to keep the holiness of the fruit because it's owned by a non-Jew, and a non-Jew still bears the holiness of the ground in the fruits, the produce. Whereas if you go by Shlomo Zalman and the Minhag Yerushalayim to go by the B'S Yosef, it's not. It doesn't bear the holiness of Shmita, and you eat Hetzer Mechira produce normally. So it's a big dispute whether to rely on Hetzer Mechira or not. It's been going on for several Shmittos into the days of Bilchanan Spector and into the days of Rav Kook. And into our days, there's a big division between poskim, whether to allow it to Mechira or not. It's not a simple matter. If you can avoid the Mechira, better. But if you're invited to a person who holds a Mechira, you can eat the fruits and vegetables. It's definitely who to rely on. Okay, the last way of growing produce on Shmita and acquiring produce is Otzar Beitin. Now, I see I'm a little bit in trouble here because the computer is telling me that the battery is very weak. So we may get disconnected. If we do, you'll understand that no more battery left and prosperity, success, nachat, all your children, and achdus within Am Yisrael, within Klal Yisrael, in the year of Geula. Bezrat Hashem, the year that we'll finally get the Mashiach and build Beit HaMikdash. Bezrat Hashem as soon as possible. Okay, so we'll continue until we lose contact totally. So the Otzar Beitin works the following. It's a Tosefta. It's a Tosefta like this. In I don't even know which Sechet, but it's a Tosefta, one of the Braitot that tells us this, gives us this option. And the Ramban in Parshas Behar elaborates over this idea. It goes like this: even though land that's owned by a Jew and worked by Jews, so it's obviously completely holy because of Shmit, there's still a way to work the land almost normally and to supply from the produce to everyone and to sell it and have everyone eat Kedushat Shvit. Of course, that bears no question that produce bears the onus of Shvit because it's grown by a Jew and owned by a Jew. But how come it's allowed? Because the Beitin, those the rabbis who are in charge of providing food for Am Yisrael, they're the ones really that are in charge of all those lands that are within the agreement of Otzar Beitin. Meaning, the farmers who work the land are really messengers, shlichim of the Beitin, who are in charge of spreading the produce to all Jews. Why does this allow a Jew to work his land on Shvit? Because he's not really working as if he owns anything. He's not the owner really. It's the Beitin that owns all the lands and all the produce, and the farmers are just serving the Beitin. They're just the messengers, the shlichim, the Beitin, to make it to send it all around to all the needy, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Shmita, that it's given to all needy people, to anyone who wants.
Rabbi, a quick question.
Yes.
If I'm a farmer doing Otzar Beitin, I'm assuming that I have the contract. I have the contract with Supersol. I supply them with potatoes and carrots. The year of Shmita, right, that contract gets out of my name, and now the Beitin is selling Supersol. Well, I'm still selling Supersol. Because if I'm a shaliach, if I'm a real shaliach of Beitin, then the Beitin should be selling Supersol, and I shouldn't be selling Supersol. You could rationalize that I can make the same amount of parnasa because the Beitin is paying me for my expenses. So there, I understand how that could be swallowed up, and not be so machber about that. But all the contracts that I have with all the retail, nothing should be in my name anymore.
Yeah, that's true, but the way it works is that even the Supersal functions as the Shaliach Beitin. Even the Supersal, it's all from one Shaliach to the other until we as customers buy the actual fruits and vegetables. We pay, like you said now, we don't pay for the fruits themselves. We pay for the expenses to distribute the fruit. Because remember, we should have gone out to the fields and taken the fruits and vegetables as them being hefker for all. We should have gone out to the fields. The fact that they're bringing it to our town, to our hometown, to next to our, where we live, and we're able to just go to the supercell or to the Makolit and buy them, we have to pay for the expenses that it's all distributed all over the country. So we're paying for the expenses, and it's from one shaliach to the next until it gets to our home. So even the supercell is considered the shaliach beiti.
Understood. Okay.
And that's why, by the way, yeah, it's very important this point, because what happens is when he's got bula.
Looks like we lost Rav Steinberg now, right?
Yep, sure does.
Okay.
So who's going to continue the shiur then?
David Levin asked the last question. So
yeah,
it's on him.
I agree.
Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Metzayan. Shavua Martov.